Hi, I'm John Nauright from Georgia Southern University. I teach and direct the sport management and recreation administration programs there. I came to this conference because of my work on African sporting history. I've written 2 books on South African sports history, and I have done a lot of work in that field. But the paper I gave at this conference was really looking at the way in which the Western media frames the African sporting body in the discourses of colonialism, and how that's still a very powerful and persuasive force in the depiction of the African body, particularly for Western audiences. And I focused on a case study of the Equatorial Guinean swimmer Eric Moussambani, who swam at the Sydney Olympic Games. And many of you will remember how he swam by himself and finished in a very slow time, almost not making it to the wall. The paper analyzed the Western media coverage, as well as looking at a little bit of the coverage from India and Argentina as to how his swim was reported, and it was framed in discourses of the primitive African, the native without technology, and all of these framings of Moussambani reinforce notions of the African body as different or as other. And so that's what the paper is setting out to do. And I kind of set up the extreme of the argument because I think we need to understand how these processes are taking place if we want to truly challenge the existing structures of international sport and the way in which Western sport has, in a sense, colonized the world. And what we want to do is try and come up with alternative frameworks that may be more empowering for people in developing countries, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, as they try to compete and develop their own sporting and social structures through sport.
One of the things, as a follow-up, do you think this, when you look at the Western angle of how the coverage was done, distinguishing that with what you say was about India, do you find the representation of African, as represented by Moussambani, sort of being used as a jumping off point to reinforce ideologies of, self or supremacy or anything like that?
One of the interesting things I think that's come out of the looking at the Indian coverage is that they completely buy into the Western stylized coverage, in part because India wants to set itself up, or the promotion of India as being more developed and a more advanced society. And I think that countries in these intermediary positions can quite easily adopt this position. And I think this has dire consequences for the African continent. And we can see this in the global trade agreements that are being put in place. You look at globalization at the moment with international business, and Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, is being left behind or almost forgotten. Genocides allowed in Rwanda, the Sudan, and the West does nothing, while we invade Iraq. So, I think that, on the one hand, this might seem to be, somewhat ephemeral, but I think that those structuring forces that are taking place through sport and other activities have serious consequences for sub-Saharan Africa if we don't tackle those head on.